Chapter 25, Boys and Girls. Rose's grandmother finally managed to unlock their front door after spending 5 minutes fumbling with the locks. She cracked the door and I spotted her face, round and yellow, with rounder eyeglasses that made her eyeballs look bulging. "I got it," Gran said with a wheezy smile. "These locks are rusty, but come on inside, Mr. Lully. Rose is almost ready. I'm Dr. Betty Green." Well, Dr. Betty was old. She had really heavy, and she moved round really slow. She was hunched over and was carrying and using a plain black cane made of wood. Though Granny's face and my face were at the same height, if she had stood up, she'd be way taller than me. Inside, their apartment was full of books, magazines, old newspapers. Good gravy, they were stacked in heaps everywhere. There were so many piles that you had to wiggle your way around the apartment like you were walking on some pathway because of the clutter. It also smelled funny in here. A big wooden table sat in the middle of their living room. There were very few books, and there were notes on it there. I guess this was where Rose was homeschooled. I also saw a pack of the old gold star stickers that Rose had stuck on her buildings. "Have a seat," Gran said to me. "Would you like some lemonade?" "No, ma'am," I said. I gazed around at all of the books lining their walls and their bookshelves. There were a few framed diplomas on the wall, and they looked like Rose's grandmother had earned them a very long time ago. "You're admiring my collection," Graham said. "We're partial to poetry. Nothing after the 19th century, though. The greatest works were written then. Can I get you something?" Wheezing, she shuffled over to the bookcase and she handed me a very old, dusty book. It was a small one, like the kind that Rose always read during the after-school program. "This is Miss Phyllis Wheatley, one of our most illustrious black poets. There is no true poetry any longer. We don't have Blake, we don't have Keats, we don't have Pope." I didn't know what she was talking about. The cover of the poetry book was read, "The Collected Works of Phyllis Wheatley." "You may have it," Gran told me. "Poetry?" I raised my eyebrow. I knew that I would never, ever read this book, but I said thanks. Just then I heard a toilet flush and Rose stepped into the living room tugging on her hair. Rose and me caught the subway to Rock Center. I had decided to try to sketch some of the buildings there like Mr. Ali had recommended. We hadn't talked at all about Mr. Ali in weeks. You know, about everything, especially destroying our work. He hadn't said when he expected us to start our deconstruction, so we didn't ask. I think both me and Rose were hoping that if we didn't bring it up, then it wouldn't happen. Rockefeller Center was filled with busy people. It always is. Both Rose and me had been to this part of Midtown before. She said her gran had brought her here for the Christmas tree lighting, and my parents had been taking me here to Tuttle's Toy Emporium since I was little. Coming to Tuttle's was like visiting a someplace magic. Like the rest of the buildings in Rockefeller Center, Tuttle's was the kind of boring tan Art Deco facade. But on the inside, on the inside there was so much color, so many different kinds of toys. It was like it all could explode for you right in your head. As soon as you blew through the entrance of Tuttle's, there were 2 people dressed in giant teddy bear costumes holding the doors open for you. And inside was a room with tall, tall ceilings, 3 stories high. The escalators took you up to the other toy levels, but in that first large room, there was all kinds of cool stuff. And of course, my favorite were the Legos. They had a life-size Lego statue of George Washington, Batman, the Black Pirate with a green bird on his shoulder, and of course, my favorite Lego creation in the main room was the enormous green and gold dragon that stood 20 feet tall. It was by the back wall. In the Lego department on the ground floor, there was a gigantic plastic tube filled with blocks. This tube ran all the way up to the second-story balcony, where people that were working on it could keep working, with all Legos of shapes, sizes, and colors. And at the bottom of this tube, kids could scoop out blocks and play with them by the pound. I guess that this is where all of my leftover bricks had come from. Across from that, there was a funny man in a booth doing magic tricks with cards for kids. He pulled a bunch of playing cards out of Rose's sleeve, and she was stunned stupid. Later on, Rose fell in love with a white horse with silver wings. It was a big doll that was large enough for 2 people to ride on. Then this man on stilts and dressed like a giraffe stole my African hat. He swooped it right off my head and he ran. Yelling, I had to chase after him until he gave it back. I could tell he hadn't expected me to get mad, but I did. I watched him glide off with swooshing steps to the other side of the room to bother some other kids. Why didn't you help me, Rose? I glared at her. Rose glanced at the floor like she was extra shy all of a sudden. And for whatever reason, that got on my nerves. One of the people who worked at Tuttle's was able to find Yvonne and led her to me and Rose. Yvonne was surprised to see us there because she was working. It was interesting to be in the same place as where all the Legos she brought me had come from. Yvonne took a work break and led us outside to a plaza in the middle of Rock Center. We sat outside and talked for a minute, but Yvonne kept twitching around like she was anxious to get back to work. She gave me a hug and told me to stop looking so mean. Me and Rose wandered around Midtown for a while, but Rose was quiet. We paused on East 53rd Street, where a new building was being built. Well, actually, they were adding on floors to the top of an older building. I made a quick sketch of the construction. All these tiny people were up and crawling around on the girders like ants, and Rose seemed to be looking at them too, but not really looking at them. After we caught the D train, we went to 125th back home on St. Nick. On the subway, I read one of the poems in the book Rose's Grand had given me. I had to admit it was different from what I thought it would be. It wasn't nearly as dumb. I read the poem again, and then I read another. The poem said, Imagination, who can sing thy force? Or who describe the swiftness of thy course? I started to feel like they were talking to me. And that is the end of chapter 25.